Hey y'all, I'm Cece, and today I am here to tell you about my top 50 most anticipated releases of 2026. In the interest of full transparency, this is take 2 of this video. The first time I recorded it, there was an audio issue that basically meant all my time recording was completely useless. I had my breakdown about it. It's okay. If you're seeing this video, I can tell you that filming today went much better. If you're new here on this channel, I kind of read all things queer lit, so you are going to be hearing about books from a lot of different genres. I'm gonna say that you'll see a little bit of sci-fi, fantasy, spec fic, a little bit of contemporary fiction, and then a whole bunch of horror and mystery books. But also know that over half of them feature at least one confirmed queer main character. I have this list broken up into a bunch of mini categories, so feel free to skip through the chapters if you want to get kind of a better sneak peek at what we're going to be talking about today. I have all of my notes next to me on my laptop in a big, intense document on Notion. And while I am so very excited for these books, I also haven't read any of them yet. So I don't know that much about them, and that means I'm going to be relying on my notes. So if I'm ever not looking at you, know that it's because I am reading off of a screen just right over here. Anything else? Release dates for these books are going to hopefully be up on the screen next to any covers of the books as well. And with that out of the way, yeah, let's just talk about these 50 books because we do have 50 books to talk about. It's a big year for releases, so let's get into them. The first little mini category I want to get into is sequels. I have about 5 sequels total that I am looking forward to. The only book on this entire list I don't have a release date for is Check Please Year 5 by Ngozi Ukazu, and that is because this book was just barely announced. Ngozi released an official announcement that the 5th year of Check Please is going to be serialized in 2026, so we're not really sure what that means or when in 2026 that's going to happen, but last I heard, Ngozi is doing live drawing sessions on Patreon as she's creating Year 5, so if you are a Check Please fanatic the way I am, then maybe you should also get into that. And also, with heated rivalry as big as it is important that you support your hockey yaoi ancestors, and that is those of us who were supporting Check Please as a webcomic 10 years ago. Victoria Schwab is going to be releasing the 3rd and final book in the Villains trilogy. This is the series that started with Vicious, which was the very first book I ever read by V.E. Schwab. I read it the first year of my channel in 2015. Now, finally, in October of this year, the trilogy is going to be complete, and I am very excited. Can't believe we're getting the conclusion to the series. I can't wait to go back to this world of, like, deeply dark characters and tension and superpowers. The Raven Cycle graphic novel series is also continuing this year. Last year we had the first book, The Raven Boys. This year we are getting the release of The Dream Thieves. The graphic novel art is being done by Sass Millage. The original Raven Cycle series is by Maggie Stiefvater, and it is quite possibly my favorite book series of all time. I love it. The Dream Thieves is a lot of people's favorite book in the series, so I think it has some high expectations as we get closer to release, but I also think it has like some incredible visuals that I'm very, very curious to see Sass's like interpretation of. Another sequel that has been kind of a long time coming is Espiritu. This is by Aidan Thomas and is the sequel to Cemetery Boys, which was like a huge hit release in 2020. Cemetery Boys is about a trans brujo who goes out to like prove to his family his own gender identity and his own power, and in doing so he summons a ghost and he can't get rid of that ghost. Oops. I think the character dynamics of Cemetery Boys were absolutely sublime, and that is why I cannot wait to get back into this world and to be able to read more. And the last sequel that I want to talk about is actually the beginning of a sequel trilogy, and I had no idea that this trilogy was happening until I started doing my anticipated releases research. Fans of the Chaos Walking trilogy by Patrick Ness, that is a series that started with The Knife of Never Letting Go. That series is apparently getting a sequel trilogy. The first book in the series is called Piper at the Gates of Dusk, and I don't know too much about the conflict that's going to be happening in these books, but I do know that it's one of those sequel trilogies where we are following a child or children of the original main characters of the original series. I think Chaos Walking is brilliant. I think it is severely underrated, and I think that if your only exposure to the story of the trilogy is the movie adaptation with Tom Holland, please know that that does not represent the story. I cannot wait to read more in the series. I also have a couple books on here that are here because they're by my favorite authors. It's kind of scattered how much I know about these books, but I know that if these authors are releasing books this year, I'm going to want to read them. They're my auto buys, must have them. The first that I want to talk about is Delilah S. Dawson. She is releasing a new horror novella. I've absolutely loved every horror novella by Delilah that I have read thus far. I think Guillotine is incredible and a lot of fun. I think Bloom is delicious. Monstera is apparently about a reclusive woman who lives in like a perfect apartment, and she becomes obsessively drawn to her weightlifting neighbor. Here's the thing though, the book was pitched as sensual, sapphic, botanical horror novella. Sold. Done. T. Kingfisher also has Wolfworm this year. I think that sounds brilliant. It sounds like it's going to be a creepy gothic mystery with some quirky characters, which is all kind of T. Kingfisher's thing and is exactly what I loved so much about What Moves the Dead. Wolfworm is apparently set in 1899, and it is about a scientific illustrator who moves into a manor house in North Carolina to assist a reclusive doctor, but secrets abound. I'm gonna read it. Also very much looking forward to Meet Me in the Garden. This is by Nina LaCour. I have read most of Nina's YA contemporaries. I haven't read any of her adult releases, and this one is adult historical fiction. Meet Me in the Garden is about two cousins in New Orleans in 1944, and each cousin is in a separate relationship that at the time would not have been accepted by their communities. So we're seeing those stories, understanding those relationships, and then we are also picking up 5 years later to see what decisions everyone made and the consequences of all those things. And the last book that I have on here that is because I love the author is actually because of a book I read last year. It was called Ready When You Are. I think it was also released as The Boy and the Mish, originally in Australia. It was an incredible book in general, and I knew that I was going to want to read whatever Gary Lonesborough wrote next. Good Young Men is about a group of young Aboriginal boys who are like making their way towards adulthood. They used to be really good friends, but they've kind of grown apart. And then the fourth member of their group dies unexpectedly, killed by a white cop. This is about the three friends kind of like finding their way back to each other, finding healing together, mourning that relationship. It sounds like it's gonna make me cry, but I trust Gary to make me cry in like very cathartic, good ways. If you don't know this already, 2026 is kind of a wild year for debuts. Like, there are so many incredible debuts. The best I could think of is I've narrowed it down to my top 10. These are the 10 that I think sound the most up my alley. And I want to start by talking about a couple of YA books, and then we'll talk about some of the adult releases. First, I have to talk about a book that I cannot wait for. That is Smash or Pass by Birdie Shea. This is a YA contemporary romance. It is about a people-pleasing autistic girl who goes to a volleyball camp. At camp, she's been planning to reinvent herself, but then she finds herself falling for her grumpy teammate, and all of her plans get derailed, and there's romance and drama. The amount of things that are perfect for me about this book, like the fact that it's a neurodivergent romance, the fact that it's about a people pleaser, the fact that it's set at a summer camp, it's a gay sports book. I need this book. May 12th cannot come fast enough. Also in the YA contemporary sphere is Shapes of Love. This is by LV Peñalba, and it sounds like, I want to say, an Arrow Ace love story. It's on the cover of the book. It's not a romance, but it's most definitely a love story. This is about an Arrow Ace musician who has like all of these rumors about her, and so she enters into a like fake PR relationship with her estranged best friend. And so I assume we're going to be navigating definitions of love, how society sees romantic love as higher than any other kind of love. I also love the idea of this being about repairing a relationship that like used to be really close. These are all things that sound amazing to me about this. Last on the YA side of things, I want to talk about Time Tripping Over You. This is by Brennan Lane, and it is a sci-fi romance. I love kind of all stories about time travel. I'm very fascinated by time travel as a concept. I like seeing it explored, and I think that there are some elements of this book that sound really complicated and interesting to me, especially interesting because they are so complicated. So this is about a trans college freshman who like has this condition where he is being sort of sent backward and forward uncontrollably in time, but that means that he keeps being thrust back into his pre-transition body for hours to days at a time. And then he meets someone else who supposedly has met a version of our main character and knows that these two are supposed to team up and they'll help each other. Navigating time travel specifically through the lens of gender, through the lens of being transgender, I think that's going to be really fraught, but really interesting, and I think it's a concept that is not explored as often, which is what draws me to the book. Since we're already talking about sci-fi, I'm going to keep that going as we move into some adult releases, and I want to talk about a book called Sublimation. This is by Isabel J. Kim. This is set in a world where when you immigrate, you leave a copy of yourself behind. So one person goes on to their new country and one person, this past version of you trapped in your home country forever. And this is about a main character who is called back home to Korea for a funeral and is then confronted by this past self that she's left behind. Also concepts of like, can you combine those selves? That is something that might be explored here. And all of that just makes me think a lot of the show Severance. Like the two selves, the split identity, the possible recombination of identity, and the consequences of that. All very Severance to me. And I think it sounds like a super interesting lens to like look at immigration through. Another sci-fi book, Homebound. This is by Portia Elan, I think. And this is initially about a video game coder in the 1980s, but it turns out the video game that she's creating is going to have these like huge branching consequences, and it's going to impact so many people. So we're also following the lives of an astronaut, a scientist, and a sea captain across hundreds of years of time whose lives have been like impacted or changed by the game that she's created. I think that that has a very like Station 11 element to it. I love stories about stories and about how stories can have impact across hundreds of years. So I think that this sounds incredibly up my alley. Moving into fantasy, The Red Winter by Cameron Sullivan sounds a little out of my comfort zone. But if you will allow me, I would like to read to you just the basic 2-sentence description. I think it gives you all the information to tell you why I am going to be made rabid by this book. And if you like the same kinds of books as me, I think that these 2 sentences will also encourage you. So gather with me. A very brief reading. The Red Winter is a historical fantasy drawing on the Beast of Gévaudan, a werewolf origin story about a small mountain village in 18th century France that was terrorized by a mysterious creature. Written as a memoir by the immortal narrator Sebastian, it's full of sorcery, demons, and debauchery, but most of all, it's a love story about one man who will live forever and the nobleman he fell in love with, but may have made into a monster. This is a chunky historical fantasy. It's got horror elements though, which brings it back to me. The fact that this is about a tragic immortal who may be doomed the man he loved, like a gay tragic immortal. Also, the fact that this is written as a memoir by an immortal, I think that's amazing. And there's werewolves. I would like to read it. Also, really want to read The Fourth Wife. This is by Linda Hamilton, and this is getting into some Mormon horror. So this is supposed to be a deliciously chilling, darkly romantic, historical Gothic horror with a feminist slant. I had to read all that because every time I tried to do it without reading it word for word, it went poorly for me. This book is apparently about a young woman who is moving into a new mansion home with her new husband, and her new husband's other wives. And in this decrepit Salt Lake City mansion, she becomes gradually more and more convinced that there is a presence there that is haunting her. As an ex-Mormon, I do feel compelled every time I hear about, like, Mormon horror specifically. I think that Mormonism is an underexplored concept in horror, so I'm very interested when people reach for Mormonism. And the thing about this book is that it is apparently drawing on little-known Mormon folklore and the author's own polygamous ancestors. So I appreciate that this book is also hopefully coming from someone who has more of a historical background, knows a bit more about that time in Salt Lake City, because there are certainly some deeply horrifying things that were happening at that time, and it's a great place to set a horror novel. So hopefully it's good. I've got another book here that is on my list because the format is part of the pitch, and the book is Agnes We're Not Murderers. This is by Jessica Alexander. This is written partially through footnotes and with a mystery of interwoven red text. So this is being pitched for fans of, like, books that are also puzzles to solve. That's one aspect of this book, but then let me read to you the other aspect of this book, because this sentence is 8 sentences, and maybe you can help me. Lesbian vixens from another dead world thread through moon-drenched cornfields and opulent drawing rooms in this literary horror remix of iconic Gothic sagas. I don't know that we're retelling stories, but we are drawing on Gothic literature. I think maybe Wuthering Heights, maybe Carmilla. I'm guessing that's where we're going. Is this book trying to do too much? Maybe. But it might also be phenomenal. And I am desperately curious to find out which one it is. The Sea Hides Its Dead. This is by Megan Bontrager and is also a horror debut. At the beginning, it says, "The Descent meets the Ritual." Those are 2 of my favorite things. Like, you have my undivided attention. But then also, this is apparently cult aquatic horror. And it's about a group of academics who get trapped in a sea cave together, and apparently they must reckon with eldritch horrors as they are forced to atone for their greatest sins. Okay. The last debut that I'm going to talk about is Treat Them as Buffalo. This is by Blair Palmer Yoxall. This is being pitched as an electrifying anti-Western. So I like that. It is a historical book. It's got some mystery elements. It's perhaps maybe got some horror elements. I'm not 100% on that. It's set in 1885. It starts about Nico. His cousin disappears, and apparently the community rallies around a sawn-off, shotgun-slinging rancher named Kate McCannon and the resultant woman-led coalition of freedom fighters who rally for justice for further missing Métis boys. This is going to be about a community that has to come together to support themselves when no one else will, when no one else will, like, seek justice for them, will support them in seeking justice. Also, the summary says something about an evil force lurking. So that's where my I'm not sure if this is horror comes in. Like, what does that mean? The next section of books I want to talk about don't have, like, a great concept tying them together. They're each on this list because they really remind me of another piece of media I like. So hopefully it will be appealing to me as a fan of those other pieces of media. The first of those is The Many. This is by Sylvain Newell. It is a sci-fi story about, I believe, 5 people whose, like, minds and identities begin to connect and merge. This sounds very sensate to me. It's also pitched as a beautiful, moving first contact story. I like the idea of mind sharing, of combining identities. I think this sounds great, and Sylvain Newell is, like, a fave of a lot of people. Also looking forward to Greedy by Callie Kazumi. I think this sounds fun in a, like, vengeance, eat the rich horror kind of way. It is supposed to be a dark thriller set in Japan, and it is pitched for fans of Parasite and The Menu. I assume this means that we're going to be addressing economic inequality and some deeply fucked up shit on top of the economic inequality being deeply fucked up. This is supposed to be a horror-tinged thriller. Okay? Horror-tinged, Note that. And it is about a gambling addict who masquerades as a chef for a billionaire who has very specific tastes. Abyss by Nicholas Binge is Severance meets Lovecraft specifically in this surreal tale of corporate horror and existential dread. This is apparently about an admin assistant who gets a job at a company he's never heard of, starts his first day, and almost immediately the horrors begin. The Sawmouth by Cale Plett. This is a YA horror for fans of Hell Followed With Us by Andrew Joseph White. And I think it's adjacent to that in that this is like rural apocalyptic trans horror. This is about a genderqueer teen who survives a near apocalypse only to be hunted by a mysterious monster whose very existence is intertwined with their own. I don't know if you know this, if you can tell by the books I've pitched so far, but the idea of meeting something monstrous and getting a little romantic with it, apparently a theme. And the last book in this little mini sounds like something else category is actually also the only middle grade book on this list, and that is Just Ask Elsie. This is by Ari Kuntz, and this is about a 5th grader who outside of school attends like a body positive puberty education course, and when the rest of her school finds out, she's initially really embarrassed until classmates start reaching out to her privately to ask her questions because they are curious to learn more about the things they're not being taught in their own health classes. So Elsie ends up starting an underground column where she starts sharing the educational things that she learns with all of her classmates. I think this sounds very much like a middle grade Sex Education, the Netflix show. Also, it's queer, so the main character is experiencing some like crush feelings for a girl for the first time, and I love that this is about the uplifting power of knowledge. We're going to do kind of a jump now. Most of the rest of these little sections are going to be broken down into genre categories. So I have some sci-fi to talk about. Every single year, I end up talking about at least a couple of Tor.com novellas. I think just because they publish incredible speculative fiction. It's probably the only publishing imprint that I specifically look up every year so that I know exactly what books are going to be coming out. The first one that I wanted to talk about is The Language of Liars by S.L. Huang. This is a sci-fi novella about a spy who has to form a psychic connection with the alien species that he's trying to infiltrate. But of course, once you psychically infiltrate a new community, you start to form some actual emotional bonds with those beings, and suddenly overthrowing them starts to sound a little questionable. This is supposed to combine sci-fi and linguistics, exploring how language shapes an entire society. It reminds me of Arrival, which is a favorite sci-fi movie of mine. Also kind of reminds me of Avatar. Like the James Cameron movies, not The Last Airbender. And the other Tor.com novella at the top of my list is And Side by Side They Wander by Molly Tanzer. Immediately grabbed my attention because I saw a ragtag group of misfits, and I was like, what do you mean? And then I found out they were doing a heist. Done. But besides all that, the book is supposed to ask the question, in a future where there are clones, androids, and a sentient mycelium that creates a fungal simulacra, who is real and what is fake? Seems like a big concept for a ragtag group taking on a heist, but I'm interested. Another sci-fi novella that I think sounds great is We Burned So Bright. This is by TJ Klune. It is about an older queer couple who is going on a road trip. Basically, the world has just found out that it's going to end. The world is going to end in not that much time. So this older couple goes on a end-of-the-world road trip and encounters various people who feel a lot of big ways about the world ending. I'm guessing it's going to be heartfelt and deeply emotional, considering that it is by TJ Klune. The Infinite Sadness of Small Appliances. This is by Glenn Dixon. It's about a sentient Roomba who sets out to save her owner from the rising technological power called the grid. So this is set in a future where all appliances are sentient. Apparently this Roomba just has some real will to protect, because the Roomba is going to protect her owner. I think this sounds a little like Brave Little Toaster, which was traumatizing, but interesting. Also, more on the odd side of sci-fi, I wanted to talk about The Redemption Center is closed on Sundays. This is by Andrea Hairston and is kind of an odd mix of genres. We've got the phrase, with a ragtag group of misfits, someday that won't get me, but it just gets me. This is about a dog who is secretly a citizen of the multiverse, and then the dog witnesses a murder. So this is about a community of people trying to solve a crime with the help of a dog who I'm guessing cannot just tell them that she is an alien. Heaven's Graveyard by Grace Curtis is supposed to be like a mishmash of sci-fi and fantasy, sci-fantasy. We've got an archaeologist main character. She is determined to prove her like historical hero really existed, and then she finds out these ruins have been discovered from a enchanted city, and hopefully the ruins are going to support her theories that she's had all this time. But obviously, once you get to the ruins, and I think there might even be a tomb, there's cursed stuff going on. I understand that, like, in the real world, archaeologists are not often faced with curses, probably. But if you are an archaeologist in a book, a movie, a show, you are going to be dealing with cursed objects, or curses in general. You're going to be dealing with magic, and it's going to be bad. This is pitched as a sinister lesbian history mystery. And it's about an archaeologist. I'm so excited. This does mean we've moved fully into the fantasy portion of this, although we're not going to stay here long, as a warning. City of Others, this is by Jared Poon and is actually already out. It came out in January. This is supposed to be a charming urban fantasy about an overworked, like, middle manager in a government department that handles supernatural occurrences. I personally really like stories that combine bureaucracy with, like, sci-fi and fantasy elements. I think it's a very funny combo. It works for me. I also love that this is set in Singapore and is apparently full of Singaporean folklore and creatures and magic. And the main character is queer and he's trying to balance his work and his home life and his family and all that all at once. I think it sounds delightful. More on the emotional or heartfelt side, we have Waiting on a Friend by Natalie Adler. This is kind of an alternate history, but it has a speculative twist. It's about a main character who has the ability to see ghosts, and after her best friend passes away, she is waiting for that moment where she sees his ghost, and more time passes, and he never shows. That sounds very heavy, and I'm guessing this is going to be about grief and processing when someone you love just kind of vanishes. The other thing, though, on the more, like, cheery side, is that the pitch for this book includes a sentence that is an all-timer for me. It describes our main character, Renata is a young dyke about town. Take my fucking money. The last fantasy book that I want to talk about is The Inevitable Undoing of Zahara Douglas. This is by Leslie Penelope. It's about this woman who is haunted by her sister's disappearance. Haunted especially because when her sister disappeared, this woman basically entered a world where her sister never existed. So as she's trying to, like, solve the mystery, explain what's happened, no one around her believes her because her sister doesn't exist. And then we are picking up 5 years after this disappearance. Y2K is looming, and this main character gets evidence that proves definitively that her sister did exist. And so the hunt kind of starts again. And I think this is about breaking reality to save your sister. That's a mood. Let's go. Sign me up. The next little mini section I want to talk about is all on the literary to, like, mystery side of things, starting with All Us Saints. This is by Catherine Packard Burke, and it is about a family who does these, like, yearly reenactments of the night that their brother killed his twin sister's best friends. Horrifying as a concept that you're doing yearly reenactments, but that is part of why I'm interested. How do you get there as a family? But here's the thing. All Us Saints is a literary family drama packaged as a 2-act play. So we've got formatting interest here. Behind the curtain, Packard Burke unveils Roland's childhood as a closeted trans girl in the early 90s and offers a brilliant and scathing commentary on the cisgender gaze. I think the idea of this being a 2-act play is fascinating, but also this family has such a fraught relationship to also add that there are characters processing one of their siblings coming out as trans. I don't know how to tackle this one, so I'm just gonna have to read it and find out. Mad Eden by Morgan Thomas is supposed to be a thrilling, form-bending novel about a trans healthcare worker whose carefully built life is suddenly imperiled. So I'm interested in that aspect of it, but also the main character of this book is an adult who was recently diagnosed with autism, so it's about an adulthood autism diagnosis and like reframing your entire understanding of your own life post-autism diagnosis. I'm not interested in that for any particular autistic reason. The Names We Buried by Mia Siegert is supposed to be a YA thriller. This is a story about a trans boy who discovers that he was kidnapped as a child, and that after all this time, his birth parents are still out there searching, but they're looking for their missing daughter. So this is an emotionally harrowing situation that I cannot even begin to comprehend. The emotional complexity of finding out that the parents who loved and accepted you are also the people who stole you, like that, it breaks my heart and soul. And the fact that your parents might be out there, but now you have to address this whole fear all over again of not knowing if your parents are going to love you for who you are. I think this book is possibly going to break everyone's hearts. Unsure. It's certainly going to break mine, I think. And since we just got really, really serious right there, we're gonna swing it back up and around with this next mystery. A Murder Most Camp. This is by Nicholas D. Demizio and is another story set at a summer camp because I know my brand. It's also gay because I know my brand. This is about a Nepo baby who is forced to work at a struggling summer camp, and then he stumbles into a real-life murder mystery. And that sounds delightful. So from here on out in the video, we are going to be talking pretty much exclusively about horror books. There are going to be some horror books of various like subgenres. We're going to start out by pitching you some literary horror that I'm anticipating. First one of those being Tradwife by Saratoga Schaefer. I think this is very anticipated. Saratoga Schaefer had a big book release last year. A lot of people loved. Why can't I remember what it was called? I'm putting it on the screen. This book is about a tradwife influencer who allows a demonic entity to impregnate her. That was all I needed to know. I cannot wait to read it. Moving on to But I Won't Miss Me. This is by Tiffany Tsao. Basically, this is set in an alternate reality where pregnancy endows women with special powers through a process that's supposed to be incredibly routine called rebirth. Rebirth is apparently birthing an identical, nearly indestructible self who will eat the mother and take her place. This is pretty obviously going to be a commentary on postpartum depression and how we treat pregnant people post-birth. Also the extremely high expectations that society places on new mothers, and I am so like interested in the setup, the metaphor idea of this, like, what is supposed to be a routine process being something that everyone else around you is like, it's not a big deal, it's not a big deal, come on, everyone does this, everyone does this. But to the person it's happening to, it sounds like a horror show. It feels like you're yelling at a wall. Like, but I won't be me anymore. And no one is listening to you because that's what's supposed to happen. Like, how chilling is that to be told, like, oh, well, that's good. You're not supposed to be you anymore. And that's just what everyone experiences. I think it's a really, really fascinating way to look at pregnancy and postpartum depression. Also looking forward to Aviary by Maria Dong. This is a genre-bending speculative that mixes fantasy, gothic vibes, and queer longing with a shot of feminist body horror. And it is about an undocumented immigrant in Seoul who is quite surprised when she gets a knock on her door and opens it to find that her sister's corpse has been left there for her. However, she takes from her sister's corpse her identity, her identification, and her plane ticket to America, and basically assumes her sister's life. But I also assume that we're going to be investigating more of a mystery as to how her sister wound up dead in Seoul to begin with. Next up, The Midnight Muse by Joe Kaplan. This is supposed to be mushroom horror, so if you like fungus horror, stick around. Fungal horror, whatever we're calling it. Joe Kaplan is calling it mycelium metal horror, which has to be a contender for new coolest thing to say. And this is about a metal band whose lead singer vanishes into the woods, and so the band is back in those woods a year later as kind of like a memorial, but pretty much immediately mysterious things start happening, and apparently the mushrooms know more than they're letting on, which sounds deeply ominous. We're shifting more now into the like Gothic and folk horror side of things. First of those being Japanese Gothic. This is by Kylie Lee Baker. I think it is a pretty big release for the year. And Japanese Gothic is a dual POV horror story. It's about two very different people who are both hiding out in the same house in Japan, but at very different points in time, and yet somehow they are able to see one another and communicate with one another. It's like they're almost haunting one another. So one of the main characters is Lee in 2026, and he has fled the US after killing his roommate, and the other is a female samurai in 1877 who is terrified because she believes a monster is wearing her father's face. Somehow we're both hiding out at the same house, though, and we can see each other, so maybe we'll get through this. Also, dual POV horror novel, Stay Buried by Jennifer McMahon. This is folk horror, queer folk horror specifically, and it is set in 1919 and 2016. It is about a mysterious spreading illness, an isolated town, and family secrets. I have only read one of Jennifer McMahon's books. It was The Night Sister, but it was also a multi-POV mystery, historical horror with at least one queer character, so I'm interested in that. We also have The Darkness Greeted Her. This is by Christina Furco, and this is atmospheric sapphic horror. It is set in a therapy camp retreat in the Appalachian Mountains, and it's about a main character with OCD who goes to this therapy camp to hopefully get some rest and relaxation, and instead she gets haunted. And finally in this section, a book pitched as a modern Gothic horror, You Should Have Been Nicer to My Mom by Vincent Torrado. I think this is fun. It's a pitch shared with a lot of other stories, but it's a pitch I always really like, about a very dysfunctional, wealthy family who has been called together because the patriarch of that family has died, and now it's time for the will reading. But of course, at the will reading, there's drama. In this case, the drama is that the dead have left behind a message. The message being, one of you is El Baka, the demon that I made a deal with. Get rid of them, or you will be damned. And then there's a storm, and the entire family is trapped together as they have to solve this mystery of who is El Baka, who cannot be trusted. I think that sounds great. We are getting to the very end here, so we have a last section, and I have deemed all of these fun or weird horror. I just think that while they are horror, some of their concepts lean more towards the fun side of things. The first of those being Bodies of Work. This is by Clay McLeod Chaplin and is a horror novella, but is supposed to be like a revenge novella. It is about a serial killer who has been taking women and killing them for years and using them to turn into art, but now all of that art is coming to life and haunting his ass back. I think it's really fun, the idea of like taking revenge on this 60-year-old serial killer and like, I don't know, getting vengeance for what he's done from the victims themselves. Delightful. I'm also so curious about I Will Kill Your Imaginary Friend for $200. This is by Robert Brockway and is about a contract killer for imaginary friends. Usually this guy only kills imaginary friends who have like overstayed their welcome, but this one 8-year-old has a particularly misbehaving imaginary friend. And so our main character is, out of the kindness of his heart, going to go ahead and take care of that imaginary friend for her and for the world, maybe. I think the idea of an imaginary friend contract killer is hysterical. I cannot get over it. And I think this is going to be for fans of Drop Dead Fred. I know that there's at least a couple of you out there. I'm also looking forward to Body Count by Cody Crowley. This is a YA horror, a slasher. I think slashers are fun. Maybe you don't think they're fun, and this should be in a different section. I personally think that slashers can be a lot of fun. And this is about a final girl who, like, made it, she survived her encounter, and then 6 years later, she's faced with the same monster all over again. And it has this beautiful pink cover. Like, doesn't this cover scream fun? Second to last, Meat Bees. This is by Dane Urbach and should just be on this list for having the title Meat Bees, but is about a girl who gets swept up in a true crime style mystery when she discovers corpses that have been eaten by like killer wasps. The thing is, this keeps being pitched as Jaws with wasps, which is an insane sentence to say. I don't know really what that means, but I guess I'm compelled. And a lot of reviews emphasize that this is like the weird horror movie that you used to be able to find in Blockbuster that like no one's heard of, but it's phenomenally strange and so fantastic. That's how people are saying this book comes across. And I think that sounds great. I would like to read some like what seems like B-movie horror, but is actually just excellent horror. And the final book that I'm going to talk about in this video is Kiss, Slay, Replay. This is by Rachel Harrison, and it is a time loop horror story about a like disastrous wedding where people just keep dying. And so we've got a main character stuck in a time loop trying to figure out who the murderer at the wedding is. That sounds like a combination of a couple of my favorite things ever: Happy Death Day and Palm Springs. Time loops in general. Great. Those are a couple of my favorite pieces of time loop media that takes the time loop and does something kind of interesting with it. And so I'm hoping that's going to be the case with this book too. I haven't actually read anything by Rachel Harrison, but I've heard that her books are fantastic. So maybe this will be my first one. Unsure. I think it sounds great. I think you should read it. And I think that is all 50 of my most anticipated releases for 2026. Y'all, if there are any books that I covered in this video that you have been convinced to read because I talked about them, please let me know down in the comments below. But more importantly, please let me know about the books you are anticipating that I didn't cover in this video, because I want to know more about other books as well. If you want to know about further other books, you should definitely also check out Book Lounge by Libby. It is Libby's official podcast. There is an anticipated releases episode. Jenny, Joe, and Mira talk about a bunch of books in that video that sound fabulous, and you can also check out other episodes of Book Lounge if you want to hear more from any of those fabulous folks or me. You can find me in a bunch of different episodes. If you have a #1 most anticipated release of the year, please let me know what it is down in the comments below, and let me know what you are looking forward to in 2026 in general. I hope that it is a year with stuff to look forward to for some of us, all of us. Let's find something to look forward to. How about that? Let's just decide that. But other than that all, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in another video very soon. Bye!